This is my first time doing it in this caliber, but I just want to let you know this is Mr. Johnson, and I want to also let you know that this I'm going to break these segments down. Hopefully, is a good remediation piece, just in case you didn't understand something from the class. Hopefully, I can help you out by posting these to YouTube, and hopefully that you can pick up this information in a lot of various ways. But I'm not going to waste your time. All right. We've been talking about the colony so far, and I brought up a PowerPoint, and doing the voiceover. Hopefully that this will be a good review for you. First, I want to talk about the New England colonies. Now, the New England colonies composed of you got New Hampshire, or New Hampshire, as we say in the South, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Those were the main colonies consisted of New England colony. Excuse me. If you look, New England colony was pretty much started by pilgrims that came over for religious freedom. Now, these pilgrims that you hear a lot about, these pilgrims is actually an umbrella for a lot of different people. You had the Puritans and you had the Separatists. Now, at the very beginning, the Separatists, when they left England, and that's the reason one of the reasons why they left is because they had some hardship with the Church of England because they wanted to separate, and the Puritans got their names by wanting to purify the Catholic Church in England. Now, the Puritans or the Separatists, the first thing they wanted to do, instead of leaving and coming to the New World, they actually went to a place called Holland. They went with the Dutch at first. But when they found out is the Dutch, number one, they like to party. Number two, a lot of the children of the first settlers with the Dutch, they were actually marrying into the Dutch, and they didn't quite like that. So they tried to find their way to the New World. Then how they done that? They first asked the Virginia Company for a charter to set up a colony, and Virginia said that'd be fine, but we've been here for a while, and you can come in, but you have to go by our rules. Well, obviously there was a divine power that kind of pushed them off course, and they landed north of the Virginia colony. Now, what they did, they landed a little ways north of Virginia, and they landed off the coast of Cape Cod, which is Cape Cod today, Massachusetts. They came over on the Mayflower, which you've probably heard millions and millions of times. But one thing I want you to emphasize on, you emphasize on the Mayflower Compact. Now, why was the Mayflower Compact important? Because it enabled the Pilgrims to set up their own government and not have to be bothered with anyone else's rules. And the thing is, when they actually landed, they made sure that they at 41 adults had signed off on this before they got off the boat. So even though they had landed on the coast, they didn't get off till this thing was signed. So that was one of the biggest things that actually influenced it. And why was the Mayflower Compact important? Well, it was the first forms of united government in the New World. Now let's think back on this. The Massachusetts was composed of basically Pilgrims of the Plymouth Colony and the Puritans of Massachusetts. They were the ones who came together and formed the Massachusetts, or the colony of Massachusetts. Now, word gets out about the Puritan colony in 1629. Massachusetts Bay Colony, owned by the Puritans, is granted a charter for the New England area. And then you had this huge, huge mass migration over about a 10-year period by 1640 to about 1650, 1651. You had about 20,000 Puritans that made the journey to Massachusetts across the Atlantic, and it was known as the Great Migration. Now, society was based on three big things. One is hard work, the other one, education. Now, hard work was one of the things that was honoring God. All right, this made them very successful because they stayed steadfast in their relentless pursuit of hard work and perfection. Next was education. The reason why is because if you think back, and I'm not going to get long-winded on you, but if you think back in the Middle Ages, there was not a whole lot of education. There was not a lot of people. I think less than 5% of the population could read. But the the Puritans, they basically taught you how to read through the Bible. They taught you, that was one of the pieces of literature they used. They used the Bible, and laws required children to be able to read. So if you think about it, it was kind of like a spawn of the Enlightenment. Enlightenment, it was emphasis on education, and so that's what everybody wanted now. The next thing is a huge one: representative government. Now, if you think back, this is another form of what our government is today in the U.S. of A. The town meetings and elected officials. Okay, so what happened? You had a representative type government. People were elected by voting, and the people that could actually be in and serve on these committees and things were all adult men. So you had to make sure that that you were a male and you attended these town meetings by elected officials. Now, let's keep moving. You had an individual named Roger Williams, and what I usually do, I usually talk about people on separate occasions. I try to make little side screencasts, but I'm gonna go ahead and just go with this right now. Roger Williams, he was a minister in Salem, Massachusetts. He was banished, and the reason why he was banished is because he didn't necessarily speak out against the Puritan Church, but he basically spoke out and said that you should not be forced into the Puritan Church. Now, after that, they really didn't like that too much, so they banished him, and he headed to establish a place called Rhode Island. So that's what Rhode Island was that excuse me, Rhode Island was consisted of. It consisted of, you know, Puritans people who disagreed with the Puritan rule. Next, you had an individual named Anne Hutchinson. Now, she was famous because here's the difference. Here's where the male and female perspective come in at this point. Uh, Anne Hutchinson actually did a real good job of kind of speaking out, talking about the unfair practices and the suppression of women and things like that, by Puritan leaders. She left for Rhode Island with her brother-in-law John Wheelwright, and they established a place called New Hampshire or New Hampshire. And actually, Anne Hutchinson was stoned to death or killed by some hostile Indians in that Native Americans, excuse me, in that territory. Now, so if you think about it, Rhode Island and Connecticut were established by people who disagreed with the Puritan rule, also as well as New Hampshire. He had an individual named Thomas Hooker. All right, Thomas Hooker, he led a conservative Puritan group. He moved the congregation to Connecticut and established the foundation orders of Connecticut. And this gave the right to vote to non-church members. So you go from everything being done by the church, and then everything, being pretty much ran by people as a whole, and not just people that were in the church. Because at this point, you had what you call congregationalism, and that's where, because back in England with the Catholic Church, it was the Pope ruled all. Now you have a congregation that actually appointed things and pretty much ran the church, like in the government as well. All right. Then you had a group of people called the Quakers. These Quakers were led by an individual named William Penn, and they set up what you call the Pennsylvania Colony. And these people, the Quakers, they didn't believe in slavery, and they felt like even though there was a land grant given from uh, from England, he pretty much said, I'm still gonna pay these Native Americans a fair price. I'm just not gonna take their land like what has been done in the past. So they had a religious tolerance. They tolerated Native Americans and African Americans at that time, and that's why they settled a place called Philadelphia. Now William Penn had already settled or set up with his father at one point. He already had the blueprint of what is Philadelphia today, and that's why Philadelphia got the name, the city of brotherly love, because everybody there tolerated people in general. Now, up until this point, there was not a William Penn pretty much kept the place together, but after his death, there were some things that kind of fell, and people actually, fell away from what he believed and what he built the city on. All right, now, now, that's pretty much it. Don't forget at this point in time they did have the triangular trade, and the triangular trade was pretty much it was a path from the New World to to Europe, down to Africa, back to the New World, and that included the Caribbean as well. It's where they traded a lot of different goods and African slaves as well. Now, before I go, I just want to say I want to thank a couple people. I'd like to thank Mr. Adam Schnug. Mr. Adam Schnug is responsible for the content that's in these PowerPoint presentations, or this PowerPoint presentation. I pretty much thank him for letting me use this. It goes right along with what we've talked about in class, and it goes right along with the book. I would like to thank you for your time, and I also want to let you know my name again is Mr. Johnson, and I'm the one that done the voiceover for this. And I hope that you learned something. I will be posting some multiple choice questions on the school webpage, so make sure that after you look at this, and you can look at it as many times as you need to, that I will go on or you can go on, excuse me, and you can do these questions, and you can submit them, and they'll come straight to me, and I can give you feedback on that. All right. I want to thank you for everything, and be looking for more of these to come from me later date. Hopefully, throughout the course of the school year. Well, this is a trial and error type deal, so hopefully everything works out. Thank you very much.